Hello, Jeff Johnston, host of the Living Undeterred podcast. I am so pleased to talk to Dr. Kari Vogelgesang. Had to work on that a few times, I'm not going to lie. I met her a few months back, like I do a lot of people, either through social media or an introduction from a fellow coworker. But I ran into her doing some research on her employer, and I got to get this right. It's the Scanlan Center for School Mental Health,
Yep.
correct?
Yeah,
It's a
that's
long
true.
one. It's a mouthful.
It is.
And since we're big advocates in the Gen Z space, that school mental health really perked my ears up. Like, I got to reach out. And then you and I ended up kind of having a conversation, which led to more conversations. And so here we are. The spotlight's on you. I want to hear about the Center for Mental Health. I want to hear about why you do what you do and what is important. I always tell people, when you find your why, you'll find your way.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And I love that quote. And it's like, it took me a long time to find my real kind of calling in life, what my passion is. And it took tragic events. But for a lot of us, that's what it takes, is some type of event to shake us at the core. And we say, okay, I thought one way was where I wanted to go, but now I'm here. But talk a little bit about you and your why, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I always tell people that I'm a first grade teacher or that I'm an elementary school teacher, because I think that's still just like really near and dear to my heart, is being an elementary school or a K through 12 teacher. I graduated from the University of Iowa with a bachelor's in elementary education in 2001. And I went on and got my master's and my Ph.D. in special education, but with an emphasis on social emotional behavioral health for the most part. And since that time, I've really shifted my focus to school mental health or social emotional behavioral mental health systems within schools and how they work or not work for educators and for students. And so my part of the Scanlan Center for School Mental Health is the professional development and training piece for educators. So we put together lots of different types of learning experiences and training opportunities for educators focused mostly on social, emotional, behavioral, and mental wellness. But we do lots of things with school districts. We work closely with the Department of Education here in the state of Iowa. So that's kind of what I do. My why. There's lots of things, right, in terms of my why. I have two boys. They're always my why for sure. And
How old are they again?
Yeah. So Griffin is a junior here at the University of Iowa. He's 22.
Awesome.
Well, I just lied to you. He's 21. Why did I say 22?
Because he probably has a birthday. He has a birthday probably coming up.
He's 21 still. And then Charlie is a senior at City High, and he's 18.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've been through our own stuff in our family as well. And they haven't given me their permission to like kind of share their stuff. So I won't, but we've been through our own stuff in our family in lots of different ways. And also, I can tell you that when I was teaching as an elementary classroom teacher, it was very clear to me immediately when I was teaching in elementary classrooms that teachers really weren't quite prepared to know how to interact with, build relationships with, connect with the different systems, not only just in our communities, but within the system of the school that we're even working in, to support families who are struggling in various ways. And that was really interesting to me. Like, how do I do this? Because I know that this family is struggling in these particular areas, and that's what's creating this roadblock for learning anything really, because of these different issues that they're having in their family. So that was really the thing that started me to think about, okay, I want to study this more. I want to try to help figure this out, and we need to train teachers in a different way.
Right. Do you see the breakdown of the family as an impetus for a lot of the problems? But there was breakdowns in the families back when I was in high school too. And we didn't seem to have the issues that we have today. So do you think that's part of the problem, or a big part of the problem, or something that, probably isn't part of the problem?
So this is the $1,000,000 question.
Right.
I wish
Yep.
that I could give us just a really straight answer about this so we could tackle this problem and maybe even better ways than what we are. But right now, all that we can really do is look at data. And, when we're looking at data that tells us that 16% of Iowa's youth ages 12 to 17 are have some kind of a mental health disorder or issue that's happening, and that I'm looking at stats right now, 1 in 13.
16%.
16%. I pulled up
Wow.
a bunch of stats for you
I
actually.
wonder what it was a decade ago.
Yeah, so I have that for you. Let me move I was looking at some of these stats a little bit earlier.
I'd be interested to see. It's probably under 10%, I'm guessing. Maybe not a decade ago, but
Yeah, I'm trying to find. I should have marked this a little bit better. Let me go back here. So yeah, this is a good one, and this is a new report from the CDC that actually just came out, Jeff, on February 13th. So this is all really really new data. So let me share some
okay.
of this with
I'd
you.
like to see that report as I
Yeah,
just Google
in
it.
fact, I'll send you the link.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, so nearly 1 in 3 or 30% of our youth, and this is ages 15 to 19, by the way.
1 in 3?
1 in 3, 30% seriously considered attempting suicide, which is up nearly 60% from a decade ago. So 1 in 5, about 18%, experienced sexual violence in the past year, which is up 20% since 2017. And more than 1 in 10 or 14% had been forced to had some kind of forced sexual encounter, which is up to 27% since 2019. Over half, 52% of our LGBTQ plus students had recently experienced poor mental health. But even worse, 1 in 5 of them report that they've attempted suicide in the past year.
See, what gets me is the end of all these statistics. The past 2 years, the past 1 year. These aren't like 20-year statistics. These are just all recent.
It's just going. When we first
What
saw,
do you? Man, it's just
yeah,
it.
yeah, and one of the last big reports that came out in October of 2021, these numbers are even worse than that report, and we've pulled out of the pandemic for the most part.
Mhm.
We're not living in isolation anymore anyway. So, but the important point of that is that we're not really seeing improvement.
Right. We're not even seeing flatline numbers. They're
No.
just getting worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you break it down with, in terms of race and ethnicity, that
Mm.
those numbers there's discrepancies there too that can be addressed.
So, is there an opportunity for us to simplify some of the solutions and maybe just do things like get back to nature? Just
Oh, I love
things
that
where
question.
you could just take your shoes off and walk through the park. Things that are free that are provided by our universe. And it's like I've just been real wondering. I sit here, my studio's in my basement. I look out my back window, and there's a squirrel on my bird feeder right now, but um, other than that, there's houses over here, and I don't hear the laughter of kids. I don't see football. There's this guy has this huge yard, and my brothers would be out there every frickin' night. We'd be out there with neighbor kids playing football and playing pickup ball. And it's like, I see basketball in driveways. I never see kids shooting baskets. I mean, it's horrific for me. Absolutely horrific that kids and even adults, I don't see many adults outside anymore. And you wonder why obesity rates are the highest they've ever been in not just American history, but in world history, and our consumption, the foods we eat. There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of things we can point fingers at.
Mm-hmm. So this is a great question. And yes, there's actually a lot of work being done in this area. In fact, my colleague and I, Dr. Will Coghill-Barons, and myself just recently created a program, and it's called the Global Educator Wellness Ambassador Program. We've partnered with UI Wild, which is our School of the Wild, which is housed in the College of Education. And part of this program is giving teachers some training and experience for taking kids outside and teaching them outside and making simple connections to nature in ways that kids used to probably just organically do as
Right.
they were growing
We just
up.
did. Right.
But now it feels like we need to teach them how to do it. and
Mm-hmm.
carve out space and time for them to do it. We also have a couple projects going on right now in Norway, and I'm starting a new one in Finland. And, they have a system, and, they have reports of really high reports of happiness and of well-being when you look
Mm-hmm.
at, survey data. And they have systems where they have, like, on Thursdays, they have national curriculums. They do all their learning outside. They don't go
Yeah.
inside. They don't. It can be -10, and these kids are outside, and they,
Right.
and so it's really, it is something for us to think about, like, how do we get phones and technology kind of away from kids for a while so that they can be present and mindful in the
Mm-hmm.
moment and
Mm-hmm.
learn how to navigate and problem solve and critical think in, like, natural spaces, not only just on their own, but in community with people who are sharing that space with them.
Well, you and I were talking before we went on air about this magic pill concept that
Mm-hmm.
Gen Z, or I won't say Gen Z, heck, us adults are just as bad. We have high cholesterol. Boom, there's a statin for that. Or,
Mm-hmm.
we have attention deficit. Boom, there's Adderall. It's like, we don't think about maybe changing our diet, changing our sleep, changing our mind, maybe these things first.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work, then pop the pill, let's say. But we're like getting preconditioned to pop the pill first because that's less work.
Yep.
And we got into this mess over many years. And anybody that thinks that we're going to get out of it in a short amount of time is just naive, and
Yeah.
they're just not realistic. And I think kids today are like, you talked about asking somebody, hey, how's your mental health? Or are you depressed? It's like, I don't think that should be a yes or no. I think the question's asked wrong. It's
Mm-hmm.
more, where are you on the scale today? Or, like that pain scale they had in hospitals, which is an issue in and of itself. But, where are you? It's not, are you depressed or not? It's a
Mm-hmm.
spectrum. Are you having a good day? Are you a little down? Are you a little up? I mean, maybe rephrase it instead of, are you depressed, is probably the worst possible way to ask a child, how you doing today?
Absolutely. There's that quote, and I don't know who first said it. So, listeners, if you know, then let us know, because I don't want to be taking something that from someone that isn't mine. But there's a quote out there that is, I think, so perfect in summarizing what you just said, which is something to the tune of, happiness is not the absence of problems.
Mm,
Happiness is this having the skill set and ability to successfully solve problems. And
right.
because problems are issues every single day. We have issues or roadblocks or things that happen every day that are in an unexpected way that might feel like our life is being derailed, or that was a punch to the
Mm-hmm.
gut, or that hurt my feelings, and the thing of it is that life is full of all of those spectrums of feelings. Like, there's no
Every day.
every day. There's not.
Every day.
One of my biggest pet peeves is when I hear people say things like, "Well, that's a negative feeling." There's not a that's not true.
Right.
That's not true.
Right.
Feelings are feelings, and they're valid, and they serve a purpose. And
And they're
often,
not necessarily you. You're not your
no,
thoughts. You're not your feelings. Right.
no, exactly. And sometimes sometimes when we get scared or anxious or worried, that's good. Our body is, like,
Right.
triggering us to, like, okay, slow down, stop. This could be
Right.
dangerous. Like, let's think through this.
Right.
But when we, like, ruminate in that and get stuck, and we don't have the skill set to, like, connect with people, or to be mindful in the moment, or to use the
Mm-hmm.
rational part of our brain
Mm-hmm.
to talk ourselves through these things, that's when we start to experience issues and start to experience problems.
So you probably know more than a lot of my guests for this next question, but where does the prefrontal cortex come into play with all this?
Yeah, so, like, that's the part of your brain that's, like, your, what we would say, like, the rational part of your brain, when
Mm-hmm.
and that's also, like, one of the last parts of your brain to develop.
But yeah,
So,
what, 26 roughly, or seems like it gets moved back. They keep
yeah,
pretty soon it'll be 55.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I did hear I was part of this like neuroscience group last year and it had been moved back. I mean, they quoted something like 27 or 28, I think now for
Wow.
for men on
Yeah.
average, on average.
Right. Right.
Um, so that's the part of your brain, when they talk about like flipping your lid, right? Like if you think about your brain, that's exactly what you're doing when you're kind of feeling out of control. So like that part of your brain is flipped, and so your frontal cortex isn't working anymore, and your amygdala, where your emotions all come from, is in control. And so you're
Mm.
just working on emotions, and you're not really thinking real rationally or intentionally about like how to manage these thoughts and feelings that you're experiencing. So we want to give students some practice and some skill set to work on, and teachers, we have to give teachers
Hmm.
that practice too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Otherwise,
I've got the utmost respect for teachers. I think that's such a hard job to be able to be a chameleon. You got one kid that comes from maybe a really good, loving family and there's no abuse. And then you got the next kid that comes from a dysfunctional family with a lot of substance abuse. You got a kid that is maybe African American. You got a kid who's gay, and it's like all pooled in one classroom. Boy, what a tough job for a teacher just to teach the curriculum, let alone babysit and monitor and motivate and inspire. And
yeah.
it's tough. And teachers have one of the hardest jobs. I've always thought them and police officers have some of the toughest jobs on the planet.
Yeah.
People that protect us.
Jeff, you said something to me before we started the show today, what that I thought was really interesting. You were mentioning, you were telling me a little bit about an experience that you had, and you said
Hmm.
one of the reasons why you had such a good experience is because there was this like trusting community that was developed or created.
Mm-hmm.
And I was smiling when you were
Yeah.
talking about this because I was making connections to what we try to teach teachers now in our teacher preparation program at Iowa and through professional development in the Scanlan Center and Baker Teacher Leader Center, which is how to build trusting community and relationships with all kinds of people in your
Mm-hmm.
classroom, which is not, and it's just not an easy thing to do,
Right.
but it's at the core of teaching. It has to happen in order for students to want to actually come to your class. And that's another
Mm.
issue that we could talk about is chronic absenteeism. Those numbers are
I'd
off
love to
the
because
chart.
I'm completely oblivious to that. Yep.
Off the
I
chart.
couldn't even tell you. So like, let's go down that road. So, when I went to school, I can only compare back in the 80s, kind of how that worked. I know my kids, when they were in school, they've had fairly good attendance. So you're saying that right now on average, it's pretty bad for
It's pretty bad.
most schools?
Yeah. So we're running some sessions starting this summer and all the way through academic year of 2023-2024. It's weird to say that 2024 already,
Yeah.
about chronic absenteeism and different things that school systems can do to get kids to start to come back to school. After COVID, we have found that many kids aren't coming back. And if they come back really sporadically.
Why do you think this is? You think they're kind of using the COVID excuse that maybe, oh, I got symptoms. The school said I need to stay home. You think there's some of that going on, or?
Well, I think that some of our preliminary data that we are looking at, and again, this is preliminary because we've never quite experienced something around chronic absenteeism that we're experiencing right now.
Hmm.
And there's a couple things I think playing into this. After COVID, I think students started to think, I don't need to go there. Like why? Like they're
Hmm.
not stealing. They don't even think it's necessary. They don't think it's relevant. Um,
Right.
they got used to just being at home.
Does this apply to college too?
This is applying to college too. When you look at college
Wow.
applications across the board, they're really down. Yeah.
Hmm.
And there's a reason for that too. When kids nowadays have grown, this generation of kids who are moving into college, their whole lives, we have to remind ourselves, they have been listening to us talking about student loan debt and how
Oh
crippling it
yeah.
is and the problems that we have
Yep.
with it. many of them who could even go to college are telling us, I'm not going to do it because my parents can't pay for it and I'm not racking up student loan debt. So I'm going to do something else, which honestly isn't, I don't necessarily think that's a terribly bad thing. I really don't.
Right.
I don't think that a 4-year institution is for everybody. And boy, we
Yeah.
really do need, plumbers.
Yep.
We really do need people
Yeah.
in these types of industries. So not even necessarily saying that's bad. I do think
Right.
that it's one of the things that kids are thinking about these days.
And the gap year idea. My youngest son went to well, he graduated from Prairie and was real active in show choir and music, and high school was great for him, but he got to his first year at Kirkwood and kind of went down a major he now regretted, because he, just picked one that he found out pretty quickly that really wasn't, it was kind of fun and easy in high school. When it got to be really work, he didn't enjoy it.
Mhm.
And actually just, pulled back, decided to take a gap year, go work and get some money. And, I said, hey, Roman, no problem, man. I mean, I'm all for it. It's not for everybody right now, but, the hope is that you go back, but the further you're out, the statistics don't bode
Yeah.
well that you'll go back to college. So, in the next year, try to figure out a way to go back if you can, because
Yeah.
you and I both know as parents that, you do limit, unless you are the plumber building houses or whatever, then if you want to go in, and that's not his forte.
Mhm.
He's going to be real limited in any type of fairly decent income if he's not in the, in those type of
It's
jobs
true.
without an education.
And
But
I think that's the part that, in terms of our economy and what we're able to offer kids right now, or people coming into the workforce, that's the tricky piece of this. A technical program is great for some people, but what about those kids that don't want to go that technical program
right.
route and also just are not wanting to be in a 4-year college situation? Yeah, I mean, I get it. And I think that brings, lots of anxiety and stress to their lives and thinking, what's wrong with me? Why don't I know what I want to do? Well, shit, Jeff. God, did you know what you wanted to do when you were 19 years old?
I didn't know wanted to do Friday, so
I mean, I don't know.
I don't have to go back real far to find out. So do you think kids feel safe at school? I mean, do you think kids worry today with all the shootings and seems like all the just the insanity we have out there that the media likes to focus on, that kids, we're in a kind of a fear-based world and we need to move to more love and abundance. And I don't think kids feel that today.
Yeah. So, well, surveys would tell us, our conditions for learning surveys would tell us that no, they don't feel safe at school. So, educators and teachers are reporting low levels of safety, feelings of safety at their school. And that includes emotional safety and physical safety.
Oh, I
So,
guess I never thought of the emotional.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the bullying, things like that.
Yep. When we,
Is that as bad as it's ever been, or was it worse years ago?
ooh, yeah, it's pretty bad. We're running another series. So Chad Rose is the director of it's out of the University of Missouri, and it is like this amazing bullying institute center, basically,
Mm,
and that's what they study. They study bullying in schools, cyberbullying, and he's been doing some professional development for us through the Scanlan Center. And his research and the stuff that center is sharing, the data that they're sharing with us, is fascinating, actually.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah, and how kids are creating relationships, and whether
Mm,
online, and how that's really actually playing out for them in real life,
right.
and impacting mental health and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's a whole, like I said, like that's a whole nother piece of this, talking through that.
So much easy to bully today with social media, because
Hmm.
there was that girl in Jersey was 14 and somebody filmed her getting hit down the hallway or something. And like 2 days later, she took her own life. And it's like, um, back when I was in high school, if that happened, well, first of all, whoever was standing there saw it. No one else knew. This girl had it all over the world. So she was humiliated. And my guess is if that would have happened back in the 80s, she wouldn't have taken her own life.
I agree with you. I mean, I don't know for sure if she
I don't know
did or
either.
not, but
I'm just guessing, but
yeah, but I agree that this is a huge problem. Is that their lives? What was that show? It was like when that it was like, what was his name? He was being recorded all the time. It was a movie, Truman Show or something like that.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. It was with
Yeah.
Jim Carrey.
With Jim Carrey, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
oftentimes wonder if some of our kiddos feel like they're living that movie. Because
Interesting.
they like everything they do at any time could be being shared
Well, and
across,
teachers too.
and
How many
teachers
kids have their
too.
phone out filming some teacher that makes some statement from World War II that, or something
Yeah,
that sounded discriminating, and next thing you know, somebody's filming them, and then it shows up just out of context
yeah.
on social media, and then the teacher's like, fired or. But yeah, this social media thing is something I talk about almost with every guest, and we don't get any closer to finding ways to fix this problem because it's actually just getting worse. It's like we're so connected with
Mhm.
everybody. I mean, I could talk to you through email, telephone. I could text you. I could Facebook you or FaceTime. I could LinkedIn you. I could probably more Instagram, Snapchat. I mean, I've got 50 ways I could personally reach you. And yet kids today feel so alone.
Exactly.
They're disconnected with themselves, but they know more people than they probably can even handle in their head. We didn't have that. You and I didn't have that problem. We couldn't know too many people.
Hmm.
And now you have strangers making comments about your looks you don't even know. And that just, I don't know. I'm not trying to be, critical of progress, but man, there's certainly some collateral damage with this stuff.
So I think there is too. I mean, when you're constantly looking, so, as you know, as a 56-year-old man, and I'm a middle-aged woman as well, I just shared your age. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry.
What's that?
I shouldn't have shared your age. I'm sorry.
I listen. Anybody that follows me pretty much knows everything about my life. So I don't put my social security number out there, but everything else they know about. So
Yeah, and I'm 45, so I'll make it fair.
middle aged, I would have
So,
accepted middle age would have been fine, but
okay. I think we know at this point in time in our lives that it is impossible to not feel lonely or to
Mhm.
feel totally fulfilled if we don't like know ourselves and love ourselves first.
Right,
Like really can sit with ourselves in a space and not feel lonely. But it
mhm.
takes work to do that. And
Right.
I think when you think back to when we were growing up and how much alone time we had to spend with ourselves
Oh
without
yeah.
any kind of an
Right.
interaction,
Right.
we were forced into getting to know ourselves because of that. I
Right.
mean, I was a latchkey kid. I came home and I was by
Yeah.
myself for hours
Yep.
sometimes before
Yep.
anybody else came home. All of this is to say they have grown up in a way where they're connected to all these people all this at all times through their phone,
Mhm.
and they're constantly being fed likes and dislikes, like being
Right.
judged with every single
Yep.
thing they say or do or post.
Boy, isn't that the truth?
And wow, I mean, I think we're just beginning to start to unravel like what that does to our brains and how that impacts our emotions and our ability to know ourselves and get connected to ourselves and to love ourselves and not be lonely when we're just with ourselves.
So what's the first step for a kid who's, you know, um, needs to slow down and I mean, the easiest answer for me, because this seems to work on me, is meditation. But, if I tell a kid to go meditate, I might as well tell them not to, because most kids aren't going to listen to adults in the first place, especially a
Um,
parent. But, if you could get, I think the Dalai Lama said, and this is in my book, the only reason I know this quote, Dalai Lama said, if I could get every um, kid, or maybe he did an age like every 8-year-old, to meditate in the world, I could eliminate in one generation, I could eliminate world violence or something to that effect. So if you get
yeah,
every kid, every 8-year-old in the world to start meditating in one generation, he could eliminate violence.
yeah. I mean, I lost you by the way. Like I can't see you anymore, but that's okay.
Oh, that's okay.
No,
It's
that's all
still
right.
recording.
I'll just talk to my screen. But
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm still here. So
yeah, this is fine. Um, I Okay, so you asked me this question that I think is super important for us to like highlight. So when we're thinking about like risk factors and protective factors for youth in
Mm-hmm.
association with mental health, like we do know what our really solid protective factors are and what risk what we have to watch for in terms of risk factors. And
Mm-hmm.
you was like, so what should we do? Well, one of the greatest protective factors is getting kids involved in different types of activities,
Right. Yeah,
whether it's
absolutely.
club or or school activities. It really does force them, for the most part, to put their phones down and have to learn how to listen to coaches and organize a
Mm-hmm.
schedule and work with teammates and work across differences and build on each other's differences in order
Mm-hmm.
to complete a certain task, whether it's show choir or it's something that you're doing collectively with a group in terms of like an art project or football or cross country, like whatever it is. We know that that is a huge protective factor, and it's also
Mm-hmm.
getting technology out of their hands for a little while.
I think that transition from high school to college is brutal for kids because if high school is hard enough as it is, in the most
Yeah,
structure you'll ever have in your life,
yeah,
around your own friends more than you'll ever be in your life, if that is a problem, when you graduate high school and you're thrown out to the wolves, literally overnight and you're on your own,
yeah.
talk about a traumatic event, for a lot of kids.
It is. I mean, it's a huge transition. I mean, we hear this from student athletes a lot. Kiddos that want to go into college to play a sport, and then
Mm-hmm.
if it doesn't work out, they report higher rates of feeling anxious and depressed and not knowing where they fit into this world. Um,
And I think sometimes too, that when you make a transition from something, you lose your identity.
mhm.
So maybe a football player is identified as a football player. My middle son, Ian's a golfer, and he's at his last year at South Dakota. So he was the number one ranked golfer coming out of high school in
Oh
the state of Iowa.
wow, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. He was a 4-year MVP at Prairie and set all these records. And basically, Ian Johnston was identified as a golfer, and
yeah,
he's on his last run at college, and he's decided he's not going to try the professional route. And I kind of wonder, if he's going to struggle. But what he did is he replaced that void with this resale shoe business that he just absolutely loves now. So I gave him some money to start a shoe business out of his apartment. And there's a community of kids that buy and trade like Jordans and
yes,
all these shoes.
I
It's
love that.
freaking huge. So
Huge.
he has like 170 pairs of paid off shoes in his apartment that is starting in May. He's opening up Tribute Kicks at Coral Ridge Mall.
I'm
Yep. So he
super
signed the lease, and him and
excited.
his business partner. And I said, Ian, I said, at 22, never have an employer, man. You're an entrepreneur. That's your dream.
Hmm.
So we're going down, and he's starting his build out, and met with the banker and set up his corporation. And so, I'm trying to guide him through this. I don't want to do it for him.
Hmm.
But again, there's an example where his identity was golf.
Yep.
He found a really quick pivot. So when golf is over, he can go right in and now kind of be known as the shoe guy. And I think for a lot of kids, when they leave high school or leave anything that's got their identity, they're identified with their identity, and you lose that,
Yeah.
it's terrifying for kids. And
Terrible.
they just go right down a rabbit hole real quickly. And it's like, I'm depressed because I'm not a football player anymore. I'm not a basketball player. I'm not in show choir. My youngest son Roman kind of went through that when show choir ended.
Hmm.
That was like the great. He could do show choir 8 hours every day the rest of his life. He'd be a happy kid.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, the show choir thing is intense, man.
It
I didn't
is,
have
and
show
he
choir
loved it.
kids, but I have friends who have show choir kids, and
Yeah,
it is. I mean, it is a real, like you said, it is their identity.
but the kids that like it, they
Oh my
really
god,
like it. It's a
and it is
drug, a
so
good drug.
competitive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um. Yeah. So I think this takes me back to like me thinking, like having this conversation with you. I start to think about not doing a very good job of explaining to our kids that life is a paradox, and so are we. We are
Mm-hmm.
not one of anything. I can be, we are everything. There are
I
times when
100.
you're going to be
Yep.
super honest and truthful in your life, and there are going to be times when you find yourself being very deceiving.
Mm-hmm.
This is human nature. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are going to be times, you are not just a jock, or maybe I shouldn't use that term, or just, just an
Nope.
athlete
That's good.
ever. There are other parts to yourself, and
Right.
maybe you haven't even found those parts yet, but there are other pieces and there are other parts to yourself. Don't let
Right.
ever, and I think we need to do a better job of telling our kiddos, like, don't ever let anybody box you in like that. You have
Right.
you're going to have a huge, long lasting life, and you get to have an opportunity of exploring all of these unique and beautiful things about yourself that are all very different.
Yeah. And I remember a time when my two boys were, I don't know, probably like 13 or something and 15. And one of them was having a tough time with something. And I said, and people who follow me know this story. I say it almost every time I talk. I said, do you remember the time in third grade when you came home and you were crying and you were just devastated and you just didn't sleep? And I said, do you remember what you were upset about that moment? Do you remember that day? And he said, no, I don't. I said, that's my point.
Yeah.
That was just 5 years ago. It's like 5, 6, 7 years down the road, you're not going to remember probably 99% of every problem you have right now. You'll have different problems. You'll have more, less, similar, but they'll be different. And that's that evolution of yourself as you go through life. And kids look at the moment. Ironically, they don't really live in the moment, but they overlive in the moment.
They
You know what I
do.
mean? That's the dichotomy. It's like they're not at peace in the moment. They're in terror in the moment. It's like they're frozen by all the bad things that happen. So in a way, they are living in the moment, but to a fault, but they're not present. They're not really leaning into the moment. Do you understand what I'm saying there? It's
They don't
a
have the
difficult
perspective.
juggling act. Right. Perspective's a
They
good
don't
word.
have
I
the
like that.
perspective yet. So, like,
Right.
it's getting them to understand whatever happens to you, it's never as good as it seems, and it's never as
Right.
bad as it seems either.
And adults could learn from that too.
Yeah, it's usually somewhere in the middle. And
Right.
and the other thing I try to tell my kids, we had an incident that was a big incident when my oldest was a senior,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a nationwide incident. It was a meme
Mm.
that went literally. I had a friend in DC that saw
Mm.
it.
Wow.
And it was a mistake that he made.
Yeah.
And obviously, this was extremely upsetting to him and made him anxious and nervous.
I bet.
And he's a 17-year-old kid. And
Right.
I just kept telling, and he didn't want to go to school after this incident
Mm-hmm.
happened for obvious reasons. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he's going to walk into 1,500 students having seen this meme. And,
Mm-hmm.
I just
Wow.
kept saying to him, Griffin, this is going to pass. These kids, this is funny to them right now. And
Yep.
it's the highlight of the day. Potentially
And they'll get bored very quickly.
but trust me, they actually don't think about you that much.
Right.
They have their own
Yep.
problems. They have their own issues going on, their own, boyfriend, girlfriend issues, and prom is coming up, and they're worried about their dress. Like, this is going to blow over faster than you can possibly know it, because actually nobody really cares about you all that much
Isn't
in
that
that
so
school.
true?
I
That's
do.
so true. Right.
I'm your mom. I do.
Right.
But they really don't. So
Mm-hmm.
you just got to remember that. And it does pass. These moments pass.
That's great perspective. And it's true, because if I'm in a group of people and the first one pulls out their phone and says, "Oh, here's my son, here's his baby, here's their house," you're going to go, "That's great, it's great." And then you immediately have to show yours,
Mm-hmm.
and your attention for what they showed is just absolutely gone at that point. But we expect them to zone into ours
Mm-hmm.
and ask me follow-up questions. But that's just that unrealistic expectations that we have in relationships, is that we don't take the time to listen or hear someone else's, but we want everyone to listen to us. And again, that comes into us as the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
We run through life behind our eyes, looking outwards. We never really see what it looks like from the other perspective, unless we see like a photograph. And then the first thing you do when you see a group photograph is what? You look at you.
You do. You see how you look
It's
in
like
the picture.
it's
Yeah.
like that's how just how so predictable humans are.
Yeah.
Is everything's got to always be about us. And if we can just try a little bit better at being more attentive to what other people are going through. Listen, talk less, especially with our kids. Instead of saying, "Are you depressed?" say, "Is there anything you want to talk about?"
Mhm.
Just if not, fine, that's cool. I get it. Maybe later tonight.
Yeah.
But are you depressed really gives a yes or no narrative answer. And that's just,
Mhm.
is there something you want to talk about? It's a little more open ended. Um, I don't know. I mean, I've made my share of mistakes, and I think trying to learn from them. And so new parents coming up can look at what I went through, and if I'm, in a position where I can share some of the what I think maybe are choices I made during this whole journey, especially with Seth. Well, even with Prudence, times opportunities I missed where now that I know more about this stuff as
Yeah.
an advocate for mental health, I know more about alcoholism, I know more about drugs that I could have maybe. I don't play guilt. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, I do have guilt, but not to the point where it obsesses me to the point where I get sad about it. It's like
Mhm.
my guilt's like, what could I learn from the mistakes that I made? Not if I done X, would he
Yeah.
still be alive? I don't play that game,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, so you just described like the difference between like guilt and shame. So like you don't have
Mm,
shame because shame is like it's different. It's a different thing where we think it's something that we are wrong. We like there's something wrong with who we are fundamentally as a human being, and that's shameful to me.
hmm,
But like guilt is something where I feel guilty about doing that or handling it that way, but I can learn from it and change it. It's like something that's
interesting. I've never heard that
shameful.
explained like that.
Yeah, but and so there is a difference between like guilt and shame, and I think that that's healthy what you just said because I feel the same
Hmm.
way. Like I'll look back on different things that I did and said or didn't
Right,
do with my kids,
right,
and I'm like, oh,
right.
shoot.
They still like me.
Yeah, I actually recently, I guess it's been almost a year. I had both of the boys in my office one day, and Griffin was over here for something. I was probably grocery shopping at my house. He
Yeah.
comes over here to buy his groceries.
Oh yeah, of course. Why not? that makes sense from his perspective.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, it's fine. I love having him over, but something came up, and they were both in my office, and I was like, and it reminded me of something I did or said that I felt guilty about, and I did.
Hmm.
I turned to them, and I think it was like the first time really that I looked them in the eye, and I was like, I'm really sorry for a lot of the stuff that I did when I was a single mom and trying to raise you. And I was so stressed out. And I feel like I didn't spend enough time with you and that I had a short temper and
Hmm.
I just raised my voice at you guys way too much. And I just like let it, I just gave myself like this opportunity to apologize for not always being my best with them
Right,
and I wasn't expecting anything in return. I really wasn't,
right.
because they don't owe me anything.
Sure.
But it was a good conversation. I think it opened up this conversation of like, how can you make choices in your life to not get you in a situation that I was in, trying to raise you two by myself and feeling stressed out all the time?
There's something so liberating about forgiveness. I
Yeah.
mean, just to let go. I've got a lot of anger that I found out this weekend that I didn't know I had because I'm not a violent person. Not even I haven't been angry in years that I can remember an event where I've been mad, just in literally in years. Probably since I quit drinking, which has been 5 years ago. I don't think I've been mad, but this weekend I just felt there was a rage inside of me, and I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but some of it's from just these walls I've built up over myself over the
Yeah.
last 10 years of my life, where people that have tried to penetrate these walls to either become a friend or be nice to me, or I've just got this habit of kind of pushing people away. But then simultaneously, I complain about being isolated and being alone and all that, which I have more human friends I've ever had in my entire life right now, but I feel sometimes real disconnected like that Gen Zer does, where I have more, got a podcast, I do all my stuff, but it's like there's just like this sense of, and that came out this weekend through my exercises. And I just like, it was very liberating to forgive myself,
Yes.
to stop apologizing to people, stop saying, I'm sorry. And just, no, I don't apologize anymore. I did what I did based on the information I had at the time I had it in my life. I have no more apologies. I couldn't have been a better dad or a better husband. I did what I did. I'm here now. I've got good life ahead of me. I don't want to waste it. And I think if we all had that mindset instead of just playing too many what if games, and give yourself permission
Yes.
to cry, be angry, whatever emotion you need to get you to that next level, or even to the next day.
Yeah.
Just get there. Worry about all that stuff when you get there, but really focus on self healing. And we talk about the kids so much, but I think parents are just, I'm
Oh,
just, I'm no, I mean, I need just as much self care as anybody on the planet.
yep.
And I'm a mental health advocate. So I'm supposed to be like the one dishing out the
Mhm.
advice. And it's like, man, I'm so far from feeling that way. I don't feel like I'm giving advice to people. I feel like I'm researching. I'm like recon. It's like I'm a big sponge. I want to learn, keep learning more about things, because if we had this shit figured out, I wouldn't even be having this podcast. I
It's
mean, I wouldn't be doing any of this stuff if we had this fixed. And I know my passion's kids, but us parents are just as culpable in all this as anybody else, and we all can get better. I can become a better podcaster. I can become a better friend. I can become a better son. And that desire to keep improving, that can be infectious. Other people can feed off of that,
Mhm.
and you can really be kind of, in a way, positively viral with the way that you emanate your energy.
For sure.
Negative people, you know what it's like when you're on negative people, they just suck the energy out of you,
And then
you
that's when
know?
you do have to set boundaries and pull away. I mean, you
Right.
can
Toxic friends for kids are huge.
huge and learning how to, you can set boundaries and still like a person. You don't want to
Mhm.
hurt them. But also know that you can't let them in your life in certain ways because
Mhm.
they drain you.
Right.
And that's a really hard thing. There are some people who are, really fun, or who are in your family, but you'll just know that every time you're around them, you walk away feeling empty. That relationship probably isn't serving you very well when that happens.
I remember a long time ago, my wife had a friend that, when we were first dating, that was her best friend, and she just was in a bad place, and she was very negative, and it affected our relationship because we were all drinking back then, and so we'd go out, everything's great until it isn't, and somebody brought up something or walked out of the room, and next thing you know, the night ends in somebody arguing, and it was very toxic. And finally, I said, "This friend of yours is a emotional vampire."
Hmm.
And so they seem nice, they lure you in, and then they just take their fangs out and get into you. And I said, you need to fire your friend. You need to
That
get
is
rid of this friend.
such a. I'm going to
Yeah.
totally steal that. It's so.
You got to fire your friend. You're not obligated to have that friend. And even your family members, you can fire them too. You're not obligated to anybody other than yourself, you
Yeah.
know? And we let too many people pull us around like puppets, and I'm just as guilty as anybody else that I talk to. I've allowed people to manipulate me, and I probably manipulated people in my life as well. But there's a lesson to be learned in everybody's experience. And I think my excitement about what I'm doing is that I get to share what I've been through, and then take some things from you and from the next person I meet, and put all that together when we talk to kids, and stop kids from dying. It's just,
Yeah.
they'll take that to my grave. That's the one thing I just can't accept, is kids being unhappy and kids giving up and kids dying. So somebody's got to draw a line in the sand.
Yeah. And I think I really do believe that one of the places we have to start is looking at adults and helping adults, because
100%.
adults can't help children if they're unwell.
100%.
And so that's why, I play in the world of schools. So that's why a lot of the work I do is focused actually on educators, and then teaching educators how to translate that knowledge into the classroom with children. Um, but yeah, if you're unwell, you're not going to be able to take care of your children. It's
Hmm.
it's like an impossibility. Even if you think you are, like, when you're unwell, you don't even know what you don't know, because you're not able to think properly. Your body isn't able to function properly.
Yeah, I look back at there was a group of parents I was talking to one time, and I don't remember exactly which order I did this, but I basically asked a question: how many people in here drink alcohol? And a lot of hands went up, and I said, how many people have kids that have a drinking problem? And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the same hands went up, and I said, how many parents want their kid to quit drinking? Raise their hand. Okay. Do you think you quitting drinking would be the first thing to do to get your kids to drink? And I will tell you right now, if there is one thing that I can say, really two things: allowing my son to take Adderall, that's on me. I could have easily have not had that happen, but I allowed a doctor to tell my son he had a disorder, and that was that. The other thing was I was an alcoholic during my son's journey of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
I have to live with that. I didn't have the courage to quit drinking myself. I did after he died to help my wife,
Mm-hmm.
but I should have. I should have at that point, but I can't go back. Who knows? Maybe it wouldn't have made any difference at all. I just would have been sober quicker. But the fact is, I missed that opportunity. So I have now that window of opportunity now for my two boys that are still here, and my friends. I've had more friends, Kari, that have given up alcohol in the last 5 years because I did. And I'm not saying I'm the reason, but I was the one who started it. That sober thing was cool. I'm the one that had NA at the Super Bowl. I'm the one that, had a podcast on my top 10 NA beers. I embraced my non-drinking, and a lot of my friends my age, especially men, started thinking, well, maybe I'll drink NAs with you when you come over to watch and have a cigar, Jeff, watch football. It's like it became cool for middle-aged men to sit around, smoke cigars, and have non-alcoholic beers, you know? So, and then if you look at the NA space right now, it's massive. It's
It's huge.
blowing up.
It's
It's
huge.
huge.
In fact, I've
It's
read
huge.
multiple articles over this past year about how this new generation, Gen Z, is
Yeah.
how, like, when we were growing up, like, smoking became like this gross thing that, like,
Yeah.
it was like
Yep.
it's like taboo almost, like, oh,
Right.
don't do that.
Right. Right.
How, like, they are predicting that Gen Z that's the way that they are thinking about alcohol. Like,
I would
their
agree with
thoughts
that.
about alcohol are like,
Yep.
that's not cool, actually.
Right.
And I'm
But
not
they're
saying
replacing it with vaping, though. That's the
yeah, well, this is
problem. Yeah.
that's what I was gonna say. And I'm not saying that they
But I'm
are
not greedy. I'm
as
not greedy.
because I think they are, but I
Right.
think
I'm not.
they're
We don't need to be perfect. Alcohol is so destructive to society on all levels, and unfortunately, it's so embraced by society as okay. And I would rather have kids vape than drink alcohol.
alcohol's
For me,
pretty. The more that you read about it, the more you realize how destructive
hmm
it is. Yeah, I don't really hard. I mean, I don't not drink, but I mean,
right.
it's very rare, and it's all my friends will attest to this. It's very, very rare. In fact, it's normally like one drink, but I drink half that drink. But
Right.
this happened after my mom died. So my mom died about
Mm.
2 years ago, and um, going through a very bad time. And I just cut out anything that I thought was going to distract me from working through my mom's death and grieving in a positive way.
Mm.
And I
Yeah, I like
noticed
that.
that when
Yep.
I would drink, like,
Yep.
it just made everything 50,000 times worse. Like, everything
Yeah.
from my sleeping to my sadness to my anxiety, my ability to exercise and interact with my kids in a healthy way. So I was like, I'm not doing this for a while.
Yeah,
And
but see,
so,
you're in the minority because most people, it's the other way around.
mm-hmm,
Yeah,
the other
and
way.
it's numbing. I drank after Seth died for 14 months, and it was all just to numb my pain.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it wasn't good for me, but I couldn't stop until I stopped.
But I have a little bit of an unfair advantage because I've been playing in this world for quite
Yeah, I
a long
haven't been.
time. So, like, I was able to be like, okay, like, Kari, come on, put your academic
You knew
work.
the outcome.
Yeah,
You knew
yeah,
the outcome.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've enjoyed this immensely. I never know when I do these kind of where we're going to end up because I've been on podcasts before where they'll send me the script,
Yeah.
and and I'm always uncomfortable in that. I feel confined, structured. It's like I just soon talk, and I think people when I listen to podcasts, I like the ones that are not structured.
Yeah, I just, I mean, I've really enjoyed myself. I love this. I love just having a
Yeah.
conversation, and hopefully people
Well,
think it's helpful.
Doing the podcast for me now going on 3 years has been arguably the best benefit COVID gave me, because I was finishing up my book. Seth died in 2016 and my book came out in 2020. So like when did COVID start? What year?
2020.
Okay.
Spring of 2020.
Okay. So my book was in the fall, like late fall, I think. Yeah. It was September. It was Seth's birth month. We launched whatever word. I had it done, published. There you go. But when I was writing, it was during COVID when things were really starting to shut down. And I kind of got done with the book and I thought, what's next? And I never really was into podcasts. I mean, I caught a few, but now it's like everybody and their cousin has a podcast, it seems like.
I know, it's so funny.
I know. But it's great because you can really find good ones. What's that?
I said, and you're going to be on my podcast.
I'm excited. That's going to be great. And turn the lens on me for a while.
Yeah,
but no, it gave me an opportunity to meet people at a point when, I wasn't meeting people, and I just lived in my house with my two boys, and, I think it allowed me to kind of do the social, like going to the bars without going to the bars and not having to drink. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It allowed me to really pick who I wanted to hang out with too, because I invite people based on conversations I have with them by accident, maybe in a Zoom meeting or something. Hey, do you want to be on my podcast? Sure. I'd like to get you know you better type thing. And you don't have that environment with COVID. You couldn't do that. So I think COVID, in hindsight, looking back, is going to be one of, obviously I never had anyone die.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't say this, but it's one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life, because it really got me to focus on things that I would never have done.
Yeah. I think it's okay to say that. I mean, I know that there's lots of people who feel guilty about saying that.
Right.
But
because people have died, and I don't want to make them feel like I'm not compassionate for that.
Right. And it's we can always recognize that, and like how horrible it was for people, and how many lives were lost. And it's okay to also think about some of the positive things that happen in our own experiences in our own lives because of that event. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I feel the same way. I mean, I got to do some things with my kids and spend some time with my boys and restructure kind of how we do life in a way that I think has been really, really healthy for us.
Yeah, it's all about, do things happen to you or do things happen for you? And COVID happened for me, and even death in a way has happened for me. And that's the only way I can reframe it, because what other way can I reframe it? And that's why I was talking about this weekend about, I know people that follow me know this story. So if you know this, I apologize. But I had a lady reach out to me on Facebook one time. It said she had survivor's guilt. She's just really, her son, I think her daughter died, and she feels like she should have died. She wasn't there, et cetera, et cetera. And she had either saw me speak or saw a post I made. And she said, Jeff, what would you recommend I do for survivor's guilt? And my first thing was, I'm not a doctor. I'll ask Kari. She's a doctor. It's like, I don't know shit about this stuff. I'm just, I like I said, I'm just a dad from Iowa. It's like, I don't know. It's like, what's free, what's inexpensive, what's logical. So I just said, why don't you, the next time you think about it, just say you have survivor's opportunity. Just try that. And she got back to me after a week and said, oh my God, you wouldn't believe how my mindset changed whenever that guilt came over me. I thought, it's an opportunity. It's a window to some other place. It's not a door blocking me from moving on, and
that's great advice.
Yeah. And I'm not a doctor. Shit. It's just all that came up on my mind, because I like to reframe. I got this thing I learned back from my college days when I learned about Stoicism, was this ability to look at anything and find, not rhetorically, you would say, oh, find something positive, but that sounds so cliche-ish. But to me, it's like maybe taking one word out and just replacing another, or reframing it. And that, that helps me when I go through whatever I go through, just to play that little mental trick. It's free. It's not, there's no label, there's no stigma, there's no insurance claim, there's no diagnosis. There's no judgment. It's just a way to trying to trick your brain to not play the narrative that, whoever came up with the term survivor's guilt, you don't, even if you're diagnosed with it, you don't have to accept that narrative. You're always free to tell yourself a new story.
Well, that's what I was going to say too. Like it's truly realizing that really It's all about the stories you tell yourself. Your
100%.
feelings are real, but what
Right.
kind of story are you wrapping around that? Because
Mm-hmm.
you can wrap any story you want to around whatever you're experiencing for the good or for the bad, like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's exactly what you just did. Your story was just, it's the same, but it's just a different perspective.
Well, and the whole idea with loss aversion and how we attribute pain more with losses than feeling good does with gains. And the best example I tell somebody is if you find a $20 bill on the street, you're pretty happy, right? But if you lose a 20, you're like devastated, and it's the same 20, but and investing is the same way. If you have, when I used to run my investment company, if I had 10 investments with you and 8 did really well or just good, you made money, but 2 lost 20% of their value, all you're going to want to talk about is the 20% that did bad, not the 80% that did great. That's what you hired me to do, was to collectively make you money. The losses and the gains together, you still made money, but your attention's on the bad stuff. And that's how we're wired. And so adults, kids, male, female, whatever, during the course of our day, we're probably going to gravitate to the road of least resistance, and that's negativity.
It
It's
is,
easier to be negative,
and we
you
create
know?
bonds over it too, which is super toxic.
Yeah.
So,
Well, this has been great. I enjoyed this conversation. I'm looking forward to being on, what's the name of your podcast, by the way?
the Scanlan Center for School Mental Health
Okay.
podcast.
That's unique.
Yeah,
Yeah.
super creative.
And you'll have to ask me questions so we can go down different roads and stuff or whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah,
That's
well,
fine with me.
because I do mine in a similar way. I just send over the person who's going to be on like some questions that I want to like explore with them, and then we
Perfect.
always end up going in different directions. So
Yeah. No, that's great. Whenever you want me to, I'm there. So,
yeah, sounds great.
anyway, people, if they want to reach you, where can they reach you? Like, are you on LinkedIn, Facebook, all
Yep.
that stuff?
Yep.
And
So Scanlan Center for School Mental Health, we have our website. So if you just Google Scanlan Center for School Mental Health, then our website will pop up. And we're also on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook.
Dr. Kari Vogelgesang.
Yeah, you did a great
All
job.
right.
Good job.
I had to practice a few times. Well, it's been great. Really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to reciprocate.
Okay, perfect. We'll see you soon.